The alien scouts moved through the dense jungle with perfect confidence. They had been hunting intelligent species across the galaxy for 3,000 years, and no prey had ever escaped them once they entered the killing ground. The Vraxith were apex predators from a world of endless twilight, their 6 eyes capable of seeing heat signatures through solid rock, their 4 powerful legs able to cover ground faster than any land creature they had ever encountered. Each of them stood 3 meters tall and weighed nearly half a metric ton of pure muscle and armored scales. Commander Kethrix raised one clawed hand, and the hunting party of 12 stopped instantly. They had tracked the human colony ship's emergency beacon to this planet 2 days ago. The vessel had crashed in the northern hemisphere, and survivors had scattered into the surrounding wilderness. Kethrix's sensors indicated that approximately 40 humans remained alive, hiding somewhere in this vast stretch of jungle. This would be an easy hunt. Humans were soft creatures, evolved on a temperate world with abundant resources. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. Their eyesight was poor compared to the Vraxith, their hearing mediocre, their sense of smell nearly non-existent. The only thing remarkable about them was their persistence, their annoying tendency to keep moving even when wounded. But that would not save them here. "Spread out," Kethrix commanded through the mental link that connected all Vraxith hunters. "Standard encirclement pattern. Drive them toward the river canyon. There will be no escape." The hunting party dispersed into the undergrowth, moving with practiced silence despite their massive size. They had done this countless times before on countless worlds. The Vraxith did not conquer other species. They simply hunted them for sport, culled their populations for entertainment, and moved on when the prey became too scarce to be interesting. It was their sacred tradition, their reason for existence. Kethrix climbed a tall tree with ease, using his climbing claws to ascend 40 meters in seconds. From this vantage point, he could survey the jungle canopy and coordinate the hunt. His thermal vision swept across the landscape, searching for the telltale heat signatures of warm-blooded prey. There, a cluster of heat sources, approximately 2 kilometers to the northeast. They were grouped together in what appeared to be a natural cave formation, seeking shelter like frightened animals. Kethrix felt a surge of anticipation. The hunt would begin soon. But something was wrong. The heat signatures were strange, somehow different from what he expected. They flickered and wavered in unusual patterns, and there were too many of them clustered in one small space. Kethrix frowned, his hunting instincts warning him that something was not as it appeared. He dismissed the concern. Humans were primitive creatures with limited technology. Their crashed ship had contained basic survival equipment, nothing more. Whatever they were doing in that cave, it would not save them from Vraxith hunters. "I have located the prey," Kethrix announced through the mental link. "All units converge on my position. We will approach from multiple directions and flush them from their hiding place." The response came back instantly, 12 minds acknowledging the order. The hunters began moving toward the cave, cutting through the jungle with deadly purpose. Kethrix descended from his tree and joined the advance, his 4 legs carrying him smoothly over fallen logs and through dense vegetation. As they drew closer, Kethrix noticed that the jungle had grown quieter. The small creatures that normally filled the air with their calls had fallen silent. This was normal behavior when predators approached, a sign that the local wildlife recognized the danger the Vraxith represented. But there was something else, a feeling of being watched that made the scales on the back of his neck prickle. Kethrix had been hunting for 300 years. He had learned to trust his instincts, but he had also learned that instincts could be misleading when dealing with unfamiliar prey. Humans were new to the Vraxith. They had only begun hunting them in the past century, after human explorers had first ventured into Vraxith territory. Every species reacted differently to being hunted, and the Vraxith had to adapt their strategies accordingly. The hunting party reached the base of the hill where the cave was located. Kethrix signaled for them to spread out and approach from all sides, cutting off any possible escape route. He would personally lead the assault through the main entrance, driving the humans deeper into the cave where they could be cornered and captured. "Remember," Kethrix reminded his hunters, "we take them alive if possible. The arena masters pay premium prices for healthy specimens. Only kill if absolutely necessary." The hunters acknowledged the order and took their positions. Kethrix crept up the hillside, his powerful legs coiled beneath him, ready to spring into action at any moment. The cave entrance was just ahead, a dark opening in the rock face approximately 5 meters wide. The heat signatures inside were growing stronger as he approached. Kethrix burst through the entrance at full speed, his claws extended, his jaws open to release the paralyzing venom that would immobilize his prey. The other hunters followed close behind, flooding into the cave from multiple directions. The cave was empty. Kethrix skidded to a halt, his 6 eyes scanning the interior in confusion. The heat signatures were still present, but they were coming from strange devices attached to the walls and ceiling. Small metal boxes with glowing elements that generated heat in patterns designed to mimic warm-blooded creatures. The humans had created decoys. "It's a trap," Kethrix realized, but the words had barely formed in his mind when the explosions began. The cave entrance collapsed first, massive boulders crashing down to seal the opening. Then the ceiling started to fall, sections of rock that had been carefully weakened giving way under their own weight. Kethrix dove for cover as debris rained down around him, his armored hide protecting him from the smaller fragments, but doing nothing against the massive stones that pinned 2 of his hunters to the ground. Dust filled the air, choking and blinding even the Vraxith's superior senses. Kethrix struggled to his feet, trying to establish contact with his hunting party through the mental link. 3 minds were gone, crushed beneath the collapsed sections of the cave. 4 more were injured, their thoughts clouded with pain. The remaining hunters were scattered and disoriented. "Fall back to the secondary entrance," Kethrix ordered, but even as he said it, he heard another explosion from that direction. The humans had anticipated their movements and prepared accordingly. Outside the cave, Sergeant Maria Santos watched the dust cloud rise from the hillside with grim satisfaction. The trap had worked exactly as planned. 3 days of preparation, careful study of Vraxith hunting patterns extracted from the colony database, and the creative use of the emergency explosives from the crashed ship had combined to deliver a devastating first strike. "How many did we get?" Private Chen asked, his voice hushed. "At least 3 confirmed," Maria replied. "Maybe more injured, but this was just the opening move. The real work starts now." She turned to face the 40 survivors who had gathered in the jungle behind her. They were a mixed group of colonists and crew, ranging in age from 16 to 62. Most had never seen combat before. All of them were terrified, but they had chosen to fight instead of run, and that choice had given them something precious in this deadly game. The Vraxith thought they were hunting helpless prey. They were about to learn that humans were something far more dangerous. Maria checked her improvised weapon, a sharpened metal bar from the ship's framework attached to a wooden handle. They had no firearms, no advanced technology, nothing but their minds and their hands and their absolute refusal to die. "Remember the plan," she said quietly. "We don't fight them directly. We hit and fade, lead them into prepared positions, make them pay for every step they take. They're faster and stronger, but we're smarter and more adaptable. This is our terrain now, and they're the ones who are trapped." The survivors nodded, their fear transforming slowly into something harder and more dangerous. They had come to this world seeking a new home, a place to build a future for their families. The Vraxith had taken that dream and crushed it beneath their clawed feet. Now it was time for humanity to remind the galaxy why their species had survived every challenge evolution had thrown at them for 3 million years. Sergeant Santos led her people deeper into the jungle, vanishing into the undergrowth like ghosts. Behind them, The trapped Vraxith hunters were beginning to dig themselves out of the collapsed cave, their minds burning with rage and wounded pride. The hunt was no longer going according to plan, and Commander Kethrix was starting to realize that these humans were nothing like the prey he had hunted before. The jungle waited, silent and watchful, as two very different species prepared to discover which one was truly the predator and which was the prey. Commander Kethrix finally emerged from the rubble of the collapsed cave, his armored hide covered in dust and small cuts. 3 of his hunters were dead, crushed beneath tons of rock. 2 more were seriously injured, their legs broken beyond the ability to continue the hunt. That left him with 7 functional hunters, still more than enough to track and capture 40 unarmed humans. But the ease of the hunt had vanished. These humans had demonstrated something that Kethrix had rarely encountered in his long career as a predator. They had prepared for the Vraxith. They had studied Vraxith hunting patterns and exploited them. They had turned the terrain against the hunters in a way that suggested not panic but careful planning. "Spread out and search for tracks," Kethrix ordered his remaining hunters. "They cannot have gone far. Their legs are short and slow." The hunters fanned out across the jungle floor, their superior senses probing the undergrowth for any sign of the fleeing humans. Kethrix himself climbed another tree, scanning the canopy for heat signatures. The jungle stretched endlessly in every direction, a green maze of life and death. One of his hunters, a young warrior named Thesix, found the first trail, boot prints in the soft earth, leading south toward the river canyon. Kethrix felt a surge of satisfaction. The humans were behaving predictably after all, fleeing toward water as prey species so often did. The river would become their grave. The hunting party moved swiftly through the jungle, following the trail with practiced efficiency. The boot prints were fresh, made within the last hour. The humans could not be more than 2 kilometers ahead, perhaps less. At Vraxith hunting speed, they would close the distance in minutes. But as they ran, Kethrix noticed something strange about the trail. The boot prints were too regular, too evenly spaced. There was no variation in stride length, no signs of fatigue or fear. Real prey left messy trails, their panic evident in every stumbled step and broken branch. This trail was almost mechanical in its precision. "Slow down," Kethrix commanded, his instincts screaming warnings. "Something is wrong." The hunters reduced their speed, moving more cautiously through the dense vegetation. The trail continued ahead, leading into a narrow ravine where the jungle grew thick and dark. It was a perfect ambush point, but surely the humans were not sophisticated enough to set another trap so quickly. Thesix was the first to enter the ravine. He moved with confidence, his thermal vision sweeping the walls for any sign of concealed prey. The trail continued along the ravine floor, the boot prints clear and distinct in the soft mud. The trip wire was nearly invisible, a thin strand of fiber extracted from the crashed ship's emergency supplies. Thesix did not see it until his front leg caught the line and pulled it taut. The sound of cracking wood filled the air as the crude but effective trap released its load. Thesix screamed as 3 sharpened wooden stakes, each the length of a human arm, drove into his unarmored flank. The stakes had been carved from dense jungle hardwood and treated with sap from a local plant that caused intense burning pain on contact. None of the wounds were fatal, but Thesix collapsed in agony, his massive body blocking the narrow ravine. "Ambush," Kethrix roared. "Fall back and circle around." But the humans had anticipated this response as well. As the hunters tried to retreat, they found that the jungle behind them had become a maze of trip wires and concealed pits. Another hunter stumbled into a covered hole and found himself stuck in a narrow shaft lined with more sharpened stakes. He was not seriously hurt, but extracting him would take time and effort. Kethrix looked around wildly, his 6 eyes searching for any sign of the attackers. He could see nothing but trees and shadows, hear nothing but the distant calls of jungle birds. The humans were invisible, their body heat somehow masked from his thermal vision. Then he noticed the strange smell in the air. It was mud, thick jungle mud mixed with crushed leaves and plant sap. The humans had covered themselves in this mixture, creating a crude but effective form of thermal camouflage. Their body heat was still present, but it was dispersed and disguised, making them indistinguishable from the warm jungle floor. A rock flew out of the darkness and struck one of his hunters on the side of the head. The blow was not hard enough to cause serious injury, but it was unexpected and disorienting. More rocks followed, coming from multiple directions at once. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking from concealment and vanishing before the Vraxith could respond. "Retreat to open ground," Kethrix ordered, his pride burning with shame. "We will regroup and plan a proper assault." The hunting party limped back toward the jungle clearing where they had first entered this death trap of a forest. They dragged their wounded companions with them, their heads swiveling constantly as they searched for threats they could not see. The rocks continued to fly, a constant rain of harassment that kept the hunters off balance and afraid. Afraid, Kethrix could barely believe it. The Vraxith were the greatest predators in the known galaxy. They had hunted species with natural armor, species with deadly venom, species with mental powers that could fry a nervous system from 100 meters away. They had never feared any prey, had never known the sensation of being the hunted instead of the hunter. But now, in this green hell of a jungle, Kethrix felt something that his ancestors would have recognized but his modern mind could barely comprehend. He felt like prey. Sergeant Santos watched the Vraxith retreat from her concealed position in the trees. She had plastered herself against a thick branch, covered in the thermal camouflage mud that the colony's xenobiologist had developed from analysis of local plant life. It was uncomfortable and it smelled terrible, but it worked. She counted the aliens as they passed below her, noting the wounded and estimating their remaining combat effectiveness. 7 still mobile, 2 badly injured, 3 dead in the cave trap. The odds were still heavily against the human survivors, but they were improving. "Phase 2 complete," she whispered into the crude communication device strapped to her wrist. It was a simple radio cobbled together from salvaged components, nothing sophisticated, but it allowed the human survivors to coordinate their movements across the jungle. "Copy that," the response crackled. "Phase 3 is ready, leading them to the secondary kill zone." Santos smiled grimly. The plan was working, each phase designed to whittle away at the Vraxith's numbers while avoiding direct confrontation. Humanity had not survived for millions of years by fighting fair. They had survived by being clever, by using tools and teamwork and the ability to adapt to any environment. The Vraxith were about to receive a very harsh lesson in human survival instincts. She climbed down from her tree and began moving through the jungle, heading for the rendezvous point. The other survivors would be gathering there, preparing the next set of traps and ambushes. Every hour they survived gave them more time to prepare, more time to learn their enemy's weaknesses, more time to turn this hostile terrain into a killing ground. Commander Kethrix reached the clearing and called a halt. His hunters were exhausted and demoralized, their confidence shattered by the unexpected resistance. This was not how hunts were supposed to go. The prey was supposed to run and hide and eventually be caught. The prey was not supposed to fight back with such cunning effectiveness. "We need reinforcements," one of the hunters suggested. "The home ship can send another hunting party within 2 days." Kethrix considered the suggestion. It was the smart choice, the logical choice. But it would also mean admitting defeat, acknowledging that these soft, weak humans had bested the mighty Vraxith hunters. His pride rebelled against the very thought. "No," he said finally. "We finish this ourselves. These humans are clever, but they are still prey. They have no weapons that can truly harm us. They have no shelter that can protect them. They have no food supply that will last more than a few days. All we need to do is be patient and persistent." The hunters nodded, though Kethrix could sense their doubt through the mental link. They had all felt the fear in the ravine, the terrible vulnerability of being attacked by an enemy they could not see. They wanted to finish this hunt quickly and return to the safety of their ship. "We will wait until nightfall," Kethrix decided. "Humans see poorly in darkness. We will track them by heat signature and eliminate them one by one." It was a sound plan, based on solid understanding of human physiology. What Kethrix did not know was that the human survivors had already anticipated this strategy. They had spent the past 2 days studying Vraxith behavior, building defenses, and preparing for a long battle of attrition that would test both species to their limits. The jungle waited, patient and eternal, as predator and prey prepared for the next phase of their deadly game. Somewhere in the green darkness, 40 humans sharpened their weapons and checked their traps, ready to teach the galaxy's greatest hunters that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. Night fell over the jungle like a heavy blanket, the twin moons providing barely enough light to see by human standards. For the Vraxith hunters, however, the darkness was no obstacle. Their thermal vision cut through the shadows with ease, revealing the jungle as a landscape of heat signatures and cool patches. Commander Kethrix led his hunters into the forest with renewed confidence. The humans could not hide from Vraxith night vision. They could not run without leaving clear thermal trails, and they could not fight effectively in conditions where they were essentially blind. "Spread out in standard night hunting formation," Kethrix ordered. "Maintain visual contact with the hunters on either side of you. We sweep the entire sector and flush any humans we find toward the river." The hunting party moved silently through the undergrowth, their padded feet making no sound on the soft jungle floor. Kethrix scanned the trees ahead, searching for the telltale warm glow of human bodies. The jungle was alive with small creatures, their tiny heat signatures creating a constantly shifting pattern of life and movement. There, a larger heat signature, roughly human-sized, approximately 200 meters ahead. It was stationary, perhaps a human trying to hide in the darkness. Kethrix signaled 2 of his hunters to circle around while he approached from the front. He crept closer, his claws extended, his venom glands primed for the strike. The heat signature remained still, seemingly unaware of the approaching predator. Kethrix felt the familiar thrill of the hunt surge through his veins. Despite the setbacks of the day, he was still the apex predator of this jungle. 20 meters from the target, Kethrix paused. Something was wrong. The heat signature was too regular, too consistent. A living creature's thermal output fluctuated slightly with breathing and heartbeat. This signature was perfectly stable, mechanical in its uniformity. Another decoy. The humans had scattered more of their heat-generating devices throughout the jungle, creating false targets to confuse and distract the hunters. Kethrix snarled in frustration, but before he could warn his hunters, the night erupted in chaos. Bright lights blazed to life all around the hunting party, torches and reflective surfaces that had been carefully positioned to create maximum disorientation. The Vraxith hunters, with their sensitive eyes adapted to thermal vision, were momentarily blinded by the sudden flood of visible light and heat. Santos had gambled everything on this moment. She knew from the colony database that Vraxith eyes were sensitive to rapid changes in light intensity, a weakness that had been observed in previous encounters but never exploited on this scale. The human survivors had spent hours creating a network of torches and reflective panels that could be ignited simultaneously, turning the dark jungle into a blazing maze of confusion. As the Vraxith stumbled and clawed at their eyes, the humans struck. They came from the trees and from concealed pits, armed with spears and clubs fashioned from jungle wood and scavenged metal. They attacked not to kill, but to wound and disable, targeting the joints and soft tissue that their research had identified as vulnerable points. Private Chen drove his spear into the knee joint of the nearest hunter, the sharpened metal point finding the gap between armored plates. The Vraxith screamed and collapsed, its leg crippled. Before it could recover, two more humans were on it, binding its limbs with vines and ropes. Kethrix fought back viciously, his claws tearing through the flimsy human weapons and reaching for the soft flesh beyond. He caught one attacker by the arm and threw him against a tree with bone-crushing force. Another human fell to his venomous bite, paralysis spreading through her body in seconds. But for every human that fell, two more seemed to take their place. They swarmed the hunting party like angry insects, attacking from all directions at once. The Vraxith were stronger and faster, but the humans had numbers and the advantage of surprise. Santos circled the battle, directing her people with quick hand signals and shouted commands. She watched as another Vraxith hunter went down, overwhelmed by a coordinated assault that targeted its eyes and throat. The creature thrashed wildly, but the humans held on, their collective weight keeping it pinned to the ground. "Fall back," Kethrix roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "All units disengage and retreat." The surviving hunters obeyed instantly, their training overcoming their confusion and pain. They crashed through the jungle in full retreat, abandoning their fallen comrades in their haste to escape the killing ground. Kethrix ran with them, his pride shattered, his hunting party reduced to 4 functional warriors. Behind them, the humans did not pursue. They knew better than to chase apex predators into unfamiliar terrain. Instead, they gathered around their fallen comrades and their captured enemies, assessing the cost of the night's battle. 3 humans were dead, torn apart by Vraxith claws before they could be rescued. 2 more were paralyzed by venom, their nervous systems slowly shutting down despite the best efforts of the colony's medic. But they had captured 2 Vraxith hunters alive and wounded at least 3 more. Santos looked down at the bound alien predator at her feet. It glared up at her with 6 eyes full of hatred and disbelief, clearly unable to comprehend how prey could have done this to the galaxy's greatest hunters. "You're going to help us," she said quietly. "You're going to tell us everything about your species, your weaknesses, your hunting strategies, and in exchange we're going to let you live." The Vraxith spat something that might have been a curse in its own language. Santos nodded to one of her people, who pressed a sharpened stake against the soft tissue of the creature's throat. "Or we can do this the hard way," Santos continued, her voice cold and level. "We've already learned more about your biology in 3 days than you've learned about us in a century. We know you feel pain. We know you fear death. And we know that you're beginning to realize you made a terrible mistake when you decided to hunt humanity." The Vraxith hunter stared at her for a long moment, its 6 eyes searching her face for any sign of weakness or mercy. It found neither. These humans were not prey. They were survivors, tempered by millions of years of evolution on a planet that had tried to kill them every single day. They were predators in their own right, just of a different kind. "What do you want to know?" the hunter asked finally, its translator device rendering the words in flat, mechanical tones. Santos smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Everything, starting with how to kill your commander." The night continued, long and dark and filled with whispered conversations. In the jungle around them, Commander Kethrix and his remaining hunters huddled together, their hunting party reduced to a fraction of its original strength, their confidence replaced by something that felt dangerously like fear. They had come to this planet expecting an easy hunt, a pleasant diversion to break the monotony of space travel. Instead, they had stumbled into a nightmare, a green hell populated by prey that refused to die and fought back with terrifying intelligence. For the first time in 3,000 years of hunting, the Vraxith were beginning to understand what it meant to be hunted themselves. Dawn broke over the jungle, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Commander Kethrix watched the sun rise from a hidden position in the forest canopy, his 6 eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of movement. His remaining hunters were scattered around him, each one wounded and exhausted from the night's catastrophic battle. 4 hunters. That was all that remained of his once-proud hunting party. 8 of his warriors were dead or captured, more casualties than the Vraxith had suffered in the past 50 years of hunting combined. And the prey was still out there, still planning, still fighting with an adaptability that defied everything Kethrix knew about inferior species. "We should call the home ship," one of his hunters suggested through the mental link. "This hunt has become too costly." Kethrix wanted to disagree, wanted to insist that they could still win this battle through sheer determination and skill. But the evidence told a different story. These humans were not ordinary prey. They were something new, something dangerous, something that the Vraxith had never encountered before. "Send the signal," Kethrix agreed reluctantly. "Request immediate reinforcements and extraction for wounded, but do not mention the extent of our losses. I will not have our clan humiliated by prey species." The hunter nodded and activated the long-range communicator built into his armored harness. The message would take several hours to reach the home ship, and reinforcements would not arrive for at least 2 days. Until then, the survivors would have to stay hidden and avoid further confrontation. But the humans had no intention of allowing the Vraxith to rest and recover. Santos led her people through the jungle with renewed purpose, their confidence boosted by the night's success. The captured Vraxith hunter had provided valuable intelligence, details about Vraxith physiology and behavior that would help the humans prepare even more effective ambushes. The creature had resisted at first, but pain and fear had eventually loosened its tongue. They now knew that the Vraxith home ship was in orbit above the planet, that reinforcements would eventually arrive, that time was running out. If the humans wanted to survive, they would have to eliminate the remaining hunters before backup could arrive. That meant taking risks, pressing their advantage, and accepting that more of their people would die. "How many do we have left who can fight?" Santos asked her second-in-command, a former colonist named David Park, who had proven to be unexpectedly talented at guerrilla warfare. 23 combat effective," Park replied. "Another 15 who can still help with support roles. The venom victims are stable but paralyzed from the waist down. The medic says they might recover some function over time, but for now, they're out of the fight." Santos nodded grimly. 23 fighters against 4 Vraxith hunters. The odds were much better than they had been at the start of this battle, but the aliens were still individually stronger and faster than any human. Direct confrontation remained suicidal. "We need to find them before they can regroup," she decided. "Send out the scouts, have them look for heat signatures and track patterns. The Vraxith are wounded and scared. They'll make mistakes." The scouts dispersed into the jungle, moving with the stealth that humans had perfected over countless generations of hunting and being hunted on their home world. They were covered in thermal camouflage mud, their bodies as invisible to Vraxith sensors as the trees and rocks around them. Within 2 hours, they had located the alien camp. The 4 remaining hunters were huddled together in a small clearing, their backs against a rocky outcropping that protected them from surprise attack. They had set up a defensive perimeter of sensors and alarms, creating a protective bubble that would alert them to any approaching threat. Santos studied the position from a safe distance, noting the strengths and weaknesses of the Vraxith defenses. The rocky outcropping protected their rear, but it also limited their escape routes. The sensors would detect any large heat signatures that approached, but they might not notice smaller incursions. The hunters themselves were alert but clearly exhausted, their movements slower and less coordinated than they had been at the start of the hunt. "We can't rush them," Park observed. "They'd tear us apart before we could close the distance." "No," Santos agreed. "But we don't have to rush them, we just have to wait for them to make a mistake." She ordered her people to surround the clearing at a safe distance, maintaining a constant watch on the alien camp. Every few hours, a team would create a diversion on one side of the perimeter, while scouts probed for weaknesses on the other side. The Vraxith responded to each disturbance, their energy draining with every false alarm. Hours passed and the sun began to set. The aliens had not slept, had not eaten, had not allowed themselves a moment of rest. Their eyes were becoming less sharp, their reactions slower. The prey was wearing them down, just as human hunters had worn down prey on Earth for millions of years. As darkness fell, Kethrix made a decision that would seal his fate. He was too exhausted to continue the standoff, too proud to simply hide until reinforcements arrived. He would take his remaining hunters and break through the human encirclement, escape to a more defensible position where they could wait in safety. "We move out in 1 hour," he announced through the mental link. "Swift and silent, heading for the river canyon. The humans cannot catch us if we run at full speed." His hunters acknowledged the order, their relief palpable. They were not accustomed to being prey, not designed for extended periods of fear and uncertainty. The prospect of action, even risky action, was preferable to this grinding psychological warfare. But the humans had anticipated this move as well. They had studied Vraxith psychology, had learned that the aliens would eventually choose action over patience. The river canyon was an obvious destination, the same place the Vraxith had originally planned to drive their human prey. Santos positioned her people along the most likely route to the canyon, setting up a series of ambush points designed to slow and separate the fleeing hunters. She knew that she could not stop them entirely, but she could make their escape as costly as possible. The hour passed, and the Vraxith began to move. They emerged from their defensive position in a tight formation, their speed gradually increasing as they sensed no immediate threat. The jungle blurred around them as they ran, their powerful legs eating up the distance with mechanical efficiency. The first trap was a simple pit covered with camouflaged fabric, dug during the hours of waiting. One of the hunters stumbled into it and crashed to the bottom, his front legs tangling in the sharpened stakes that lined the walls. He howled in pain and tried to climb out, but the pit was too deep and his legs too damaged. The other hunters did not stop to help him. They kept running, their survival instincts overriding any sense of loyalty or camaraderie. Kethrix led the retreat, his 4 legs pumping with desperate energy as he crashed through the undergrowth. The second trap was more elaborate, a network of trip wires connected to weighted logs that swung down from the trees. Another hunter was caught by the logs, knocked off his feet and pinned to the ground. Humans swarmed from the darkness, binding his limbs before he could recover. 2 hunters left. Kethrix could hear them behind him, their breathing ragged with exhaustion and fear. The canyon was close now. He could hear the roar of the river ahead. If they could just reach the water, they could swim to safety on the other side. But the river was where the humans had concentrated their final defense. They had spent 2 days building a wall of sharpened stakes that stretched across the canyon, blocking the only safe crossing point. When Kethrix burst through the tree line and saw the barrier ahead of him, he knew that the hunt was over. He turned to face the humans who were emerging from the jungle behind him. There were dozens of them, covered in mud and armed with primitive weapons that had proven devastatingly effective against Vraxith hunting parties. They moved with confidence, with the certainty of predators who knew their prey was cornered. Sergeant Santos stepped forward, her improvised spear held ready. She met Kethrix's gaze without flinching, her soft human eyes showing no fear. "You have 2 choices," she said calmly. "Surrender and live or fight and die. Your hunting days are over, Commander. Your species has hunted intelligent life across this galaxy for 3,000 years, and it ends here tonight on this unnamed world that you thought would be just another killing ground." Kethrix looked at the humans surrounding him, at the crude weapons they carried and the determination in their eyes. These were not the helpless prey his people had expected. These were survivors, fighters, creatures who had crawled out of the primordial mud of their home world and clawed their way to the stars through sheer stubbornness and adaptability. The Vraxith had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that technological superiority and physical strength were the only measures of a species' worth. They had never considered that intelligence, creativity, and the absolute refusal to surrender could be weapons just as powerful as claws and venom. Kethrix lowered his head, his massive body sagging with exhaustion and defeat. Behind him, his last remaining hunter did the same, recognizing that further resistance was pointless. "We surrender," Kethrix said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "You have won, humans, the hunt is yours." Santos nodded, gesturing for her people to move forward and secure the prisoners. The battle was over, but she knew that this was only the beginning. The Vraxith home ship was still in orbit, still waiting for a report from the hunting party. More hunters would come eventually, seeking revenge for their fallen companions. But that was a problem for another day. For now, the 40 survivors of the crashed colony ship had done the impossible. They had defeated the galaxy's greatest hunters with nothing but their minds and their hands and their unbreakable will to survive. As the humans led their prisoners away from the river canyon, Santos allowed herself a small smile. Somewhere across the stars, other species lived in fear of the Vraxith hunters, cowering in their settlements and praying that the predators would pass them by. Those species would eventually learn what had happened here, would hear the story of how a handful of unarmed humans had turned the hunters into the hunted. And when they heard that story, they would remember that humanity was not prey. Humanity was something far more dangerous, a species that had evolved on a planet where everything wanted to kill them and had learned to kill everything right back. The Vraxith had learned this lesson the hard way. The rest of the galaxy was about to learn it too. The Vraxith home ship detected the emergency beacon 3 days after the hunting party had departed. Captain Varix monitored the signal with growing unease as he realized that it was not a standard hunting update but a distress call. Something had gone terribly wrong on the planet below. He ordered a shuttle prepared and loaded it with a full combat team, 20 of the finest Vraxith warriors available. They would descend to the planet, locate the hunting party, and deal with whatever local resistance had developed. It was probably some native predator that had surprised Kethrix's team, perhaps a pack of creatures that had somehow adapted to Vraxith hunting tactics. The shuttle landed in the jungle clearing where the original hunting party had made camp. Varix led his warriors into the forest, their sensors scanning for any sign of heat signatures or movement. The jungle was quiet, almost too quiet, the local wildlife having learned to hide when predators walked these trails. They found the bodies first. 3 Vraxith hunters, their armored hides torn and battered, lay in shallow graves marked with simple stone cairns. The humans had buried their enemies with respect, a gesture that Varix found disturbing in its implications. Prey did not honor the dead of predators. A message had been carved into a nearby tree, rough letters cut deep into the wood by metal tools. "Your hunters came for us. We survived. Turn back now or join them." Varix stared at the message for a long moment, his 6 eyes reading the words over and over. This was impossible. Humans were soft, weak creatures with no natural weapons. They could not have defeated an experienced Vraxith hunting party. There had to be some other explanation. But as he ventured deeper into the jungle, he began to find evidence that the impossible had indeed happened. Collapsed caves and triggered traps spoke of careful planning and preparation. Thermal decoys and camouflage materials showed a sophisticated understanding of Vraxith hunting techniques. Blood trails and discarded weapons told the story of running battles where the hunters had become the hunted. "Captain," one of his warriors called out, "we have found survivors." Varix rushed to the location, expecting to find wounded members of Kethrix's hunting party. Instead, he found a group of humans waiting for him in a small clearing. They were armed with primitive weapons and covered in mud, but they showed no fear as the Vraxith warriors surrounded them. Sergeant Santos stepped forward, her back straight and her eyes steady. She had expected the aliens to send reinforcements, had prepared for this moment with the same careful planning that had defeated the original hunting party. "I am Sergeant Maria Santos of the Human Colonial Administration," she announced. "Your commander Kethrix and 3 of his hunters are our prisoners. The rest of his party is dead. You can attack us and probably kill most of us, but some of my people will escape into this jungle, and they will hunt your warriors down one by one until none of you remain. Or you can listen to what I have to say." Varix was not accustomed to receiving terms from prey species. His first instinct was to order his warriors to attack, to demonstrate that the Vraxith were still the superior predators. But something in the human's eyes gave him pause, a cold certainty that spoke of absolute confidence in her words. "Speak," he growled, his claws flexing with barely contained aggression. Santos nodded, her expression unchanging. "Your people have been hunting intelligent species across this galaxy for 3,000 years. You've encountered hundreds of different civilizations, and you've treated them all as prey. Some of them fought back, but none of them ever truly challenged your dominance. You've grown comfortable, confident that no species could ever match the Vraxith hunters." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We're different. Humanity evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day of our existence. We survived ice ages and supervolcanoes and mass extinctions. We fought saber-toothed cats and giant bears and each other. By the time we developed space travel, we had already proven that we could outlast any threat the universe could throw at us." Varix listened, his analytical mind processing the information despite his instinctive rejection of everything the human was saying. He had studied human history as part of his training, had dismissed their violent past as the typical struggles of a primitive species. Now he was beginning to see that history in a different light. "We didn't come to this part of the galaxy to fight you," Santos continued. "We came to build new homes, to create new futures for our families. But you came for us anyway, treating us like animals to be hunted for sport. That was your mistake. You forced us to remember who we really are, and who we really are is the most dangerous species ever to crawl out of a planet's gravity well." She gestured to the jungle around them, to the traps and ambush points that the humans had prepared over the past week. "This planet is now our territory. Every tree, every rock, every shadow belongs to us. Your hunting parties will never be safe here. Your reinforcements will face the same fate as Kethrix's team. You can keep sending warriors and we will keep killing them, or you can make a different choice." "What choice?" Varix asked, his voice harsh with suppressed anger. "Peace," Santos said simply. "Mutual recognition between our species. The Vraxith stop hunting humans and we stop teaching the rest of the galaxy how to fight back against you. Because if you don't agree to peace, if you keep pushing, we will share everything we've learned about your weaknesses with every species you've ever hunted. We'll train them, arm them, show them how to turn your hunting grounds into killing zones. Your 3,000-year reign as the galaxy's apex predators will end, and you will become the prey." The clearing fell silent as Varix processed the threat. He could see the truth of it in the human's eyes, could feel the weight of history behind her words. Humanity was offering the Vraxith a choice, one that no species had ever been strong enough to present before. Continue as they always had and face an endless war against a species that refused to be prey. Or acknowledge humanity as equals and preserve the hunting traditions that had sustained the Vraxith for millennia. The choice was clear, even if the consequences were humiliating. "Release our prisoners," Varix said finally, "and I will communicate your terms to our council." Santos shook her head. "Your prisoners stay with us until the council agrees to formal peace. Their insurance, to make sure you don't decide to solve this problem with a bombardment from orbit. Once the treaty is signed, they'll be returned to you unharmed." Varix's claws twitched, but he forced himself to remain calm. The humans had thought of everything, had anticipated every Vraxith response and prepared countermeasures. They were not prey. They were predators of a different kind, hunters who used their minds instead of their bodies, their creativity instead of their strength. "Very well," he said, the words like acid on his tongue. "I will relay your terms, but know this, human. The Vraxith have never negotiated with prey before. This is not something our species will accept easily." Santos smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then help them understand what the alternative looks like. Show them the graves of your fallen hunters, the traps we built, the tactics we developed. Help them understand that hunting humanity is not sport, it's suicide." Varix turned and led his warriors back toward the shuttle, his mind racing with the implications of everything he had witnessed. The council would resist, would demand revenge, would insist that Vraxith honor required the destruction of these impudent humans. But Varix had seen the truth with his own eyes. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was a predator species, perhaps the most dangerous predator species the galaxy had ever produced. They had evolved on a world of constant challenges and had developed the ability to adapt to any threat, to turn any environment to their advantage, to survive against any odds. The Vraxith had hunted across the stars for 3,000 years, but they had never faced anything like this. And as Varix looked back at the jungle where 40 humans had defeated 12 of his finest warriors, he understood that the old ways were ending. A new era was beginning, one where humanity stood as equals among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. In the clearing behind him, Sergeant Santos watched the Vraxith shuttle lift off and disappear into the clouds. She allowed herself a moment of exhaustion, letting the tension drain from her muscles for the first time in a week. They had won, against all odds, against every logical expectation. 40 survivors with no weapons, no technology, and no backup had defeated the galaxy's greatest hunters. Around her, the other survivors emerged from their hiding places, their faces showing the same mixture of exhaustion and disbelief that she felt. They had lost friends in this battle, would carry the scars of this experience for the rest of their lives. But they had survived, and in surviving, they had changed the course of galactic history. "What happens now?" Private Chen asked, his voice hoarse with fatigue. Santos looked up at the sky where the Vraxith ship had vanished, then back at the jungle that had become their fortress. "Now we wait for the treaty, and while we wait, we build. This planet is our home now, and we're going to make sure that no one ever threatens it again." The survivors nodded, understanding what she meant. They would transform this world into a fortress, a demonstration of what humanity could accomplish when pushed to the edge of extinction. They would build cities and defenses, develop technologies and train soldiers, create a beacon of human resilience that would shine across the galaxy. And when other species looked at what they had built, they would remember the story of how it all began. How a group of shipwrecked colonists faced the galaxy's most feared predators and emerged victorious. How humanity proved that they would never be prey, no matter how powerful their enemies or how desperate their circumstances. The jungle stretched around them, green and eternal, a monument to the battle that had been fought and won. Somewhere in that jungle, buried beneath simple stone cairns, lay the hunters who had expected to find easy prey and had instead found something far more dangerous. They had found humanity, and humanity had reminded the galaxy that some species refused to go quietly into the night. The stars watched in silence as a new power rose from the ashes of a crashed colony ship, a power that would reshape the balance of the galaxy in the decades to come. The Vraxith hunt was over, and the age of human expansion had begun.